When Daniel stepped into that dark pit, surrounded by roaring lions, the world saw danger, but heaven saw faith. In that silence filled with growls, Daniel's heartbeat echoed the rhythm of trust, not fear. Because when your soul belongs to God, even the jaws of death cannot close on you. Welcome to Divine War Stories, where faith meets fire, and where the battles of the Bible reveal the eternal truth of God's heart. Here we don't just tell stories, we uncover the spiritual wars behind them, and how Christ calls us to walk in His light, even when the world feels like a lion's den. Daniel didn't walk into the lion's den as a hero. He walked in as a man who refused to bend his soul. The law of the land had changed, but the law of heaven never does. When the world demanded worship to a king, Daniel bowed only to the King of Kings. That's the heart of what we often call holiness, not perfection but separation. It's not about being flawless but about belonging fully to God. When you refuse to compromise your faith even when the price is high, that's when heaven calls your name. Daniel knew that the den was real, but so was his God. Being set apart for God doesn't mean we live without mistakes. It means we live with direction. Daniel wasn't saved because he was sinless. He was saved because he was surrendered. That's the difference between human effort and divine grace. Too often we think walking with God means never stumbling, but it's really about never letting go of His hand when we do. The lions around Daniel weren't just animals. They were symbols of every temptation that roars to devour our faith: fear, pride, comfort, and compromise. Yet Daniel's peace came not from his strength, but from his surrender. Christ calls us into that same kind of courage. He knows we can't be pure by our own power, that's why He gave us His Spirit. It's not about becoming good enough for God, but about letting His goodness flow through us. The command to live set apart isn't cruel, it's compassionate. It's Christ saying, protect your soul, it's the most valuable thing you own. Because in a world that sells comfort and applause, your soul is the only currency that never loses value. Daniel protected his by choosing prayer over popularity, devotion over approval. When the lion's shadows danced across the stone walls, Daniel didn't plead for mercy from men. He had already spoken with the one whose voice calms creation. That's what it means to walk with divine focus, to live as if heaven is more real than fear. Christ calls us to that same reality. To live differently not because we're better but because we've been bought by His blood. That's the foundation of living a life that shines light into darkness. When your faith is anchored in Christ, no den can destroy you, it only becomes your testimony. Think about it, Daniel didn't escape the trial, he went through it. And so did Jesus. The Son of God didn't avoid the cross, He conquered it by entering it. Holiness, in its truest form, is not isolation from pain, it's presence within it with purpose. The lions may still roar, the fire may still burn, but when Christ is in you, your peace is untouchable. The same God who shut the lions' mouths in Daniel's day is the one who silences guilt and shame in yours. That's the beauty of walking with Christ. He transforms your greatest threat into your greatest testimony. Sin is not just a list of wrong actions, it's the slow separation between your heart and God's. It's when you start feeding the lions instead of trusting the keeper. That's why Jesus warns us not to play with it, because sin doesn't stay small. It grows, devours, and blinds. But grace doesn't just forgive, it frees. It's the power to close the mouths of the things that once ruled you. Daniel didn't stand in that den as a perfect man. He stood as a forgiven one, covered by the same mercy that covers you and me through Christ. Every time you choose integrity over comfort, every time you pray when it's easier to stay silent, you step into your own version of the lion's den. But here's the truth, the God who was with Daniel hasn't changed. He's still sending His angels to guard those who love Him, still turning fear into faith, still rescuing those who refuse to bow. When you choose to live differently, not out of pride but out of love for Christ, the world may not understand, but heaven will celebrate. Our culture celebrates the bold but rarely the obedient. Yet obedience is the real rebellion against darkness. Daniel didn't roar louder than the lions, he simply trusted louder. That's what living a life dedicated to God looks like, quiet strength that confuses chaos. Christ doesn't ask us to be loud about faith, He asks us to live it. When the world sees a peace they can't explain, they'll want to know the source. And that's when your life becomes a sermon without words, a mirror reflecting the mercy of Christ. When morning came, the king rushed to the den, hoping for a miracle, and he found one. Daniel emerged untouched, not because the lions weren't hungry, but because heaven had already made its decree, not this one. That's how God guards those who walk with Him. You may still face the pit, but you won't face it alone. Christ is that same unseen presence holding back what was meant to destroy you. His call to purity is not about rules, it's about protection. It's his way of saying, stay close. I want you safe. If you've been in a den of your own, fear, addiction, guilt, or loneliness, know this, you're not forgotten. Just as Daniel's prayers reached heaven from the depths of the pit, yours do too. God isn't asking for perfection, he's asking for surrender. The lions will still circle, the darkness will still whisper, but Christ remains the light that no den can dim. When Daniel stepped out of the den, the silence of the lions became a sermon to an entire kingdom. The God who saves doesn't just protect his children, he glorifies his name through them. Your deliverance is never just about you, it's about showing the world what faith looks like when it's tested. Christ works the same way today. He allows us to face dens so that when we walk out, the people watching will know there's a living God who still rescues. The pain you endure isn't wasted, it's proof that heaven still intervenes in human stories. The king ordered the world to honor Daniel's God, but notice, Daniel never sought the spotlight. He just stayed faithful. That's what makes a life pure before God, quiet consistency. You don't need to announce your devotion, you just live it. Christ said, "Let your light shine, not so people see you but so they see him through you." When your faith becomes steady, not performative, that's when transformation truly begins. Because Christ isn't impressed by public displays, he's moved by private surrender. Let's be honest, holiness feels hard because the world has normalized compromise. We're told that a little sin is harmless, that we can serve both God and our desires. But Daniel's story says otherwise, he chose loyalty over luxury. That's what separates the chosen from the comfortable. Following Christ means walking against the current, even when everyone else flows the other way. Yet the reward isn't fame, it's freedom. True purity liberates your soul from the need to please anyone but God. And here's the miracle, when you live with that kind of conviction you don't lose peace, you gain it. The lions may still roar, but they can't devour what's already surrendered to God. Every temptation loses its grip when your heart belongs fully to Christ. Holiness is not chains, it's wings. It's not about what you can't do, it's about who you get to become. You're becoming someone whose life echoes the character of Jesus himself, whose eyes see the world with compassion, and whose heart beats for righteousness. Christ didn't come to demand perfection. He came to restore communion. That's why he said, "Be holy for I am holy." Not as a threat but as an invitation, to walk with him, think like him, and love like him. When we live with that intention, our lives become sacred ground. Sin loses its allure when love for Christ grows deeper. The closer you walk with him, the less the noise of the world matters. That's what Daniel understood, that intimacy with God is the only thing stronger than fear. Maybe your lion's den isn't made of stone but of silence, unanswered prayers, internal battles, hidden shame. You may not see the angels but they're there, holding back the destruction the enemy planned for you. The same God who heard Daniel's prayer still listens in the dark. That's the beauty of divine grace. It reaches us not when we stand tall but when we kneel low. Christ doesn't turn away from broken hearts, he rebuilds them. If you still feel trapped, don't stop praying. Heaven moves when you do. And when he does, the world will notice. Just like King Darius, people will see the evidence of your faith. They'll wonder how you survived what should have destroyed you. That's when your life becomes a living altar, a testimony that Christ is still the Lion of Judah, protecting his own. Your scars become sacred, your story becomes strength for someone else. Because when God delivers you, he's not just saving your life, he's saving others through your example. This is why we can't take sin lightly. It's not about rules, it's about relationship. Sin separates, but holiness restores. When Christ calls us to purity, he's calling us back home, to our original purpose, to the reflection of his image we were meant to bear. Each act of obedience, no matter how small, is a step toward that homecoming. You don't have to roar like Daniel, you just have to remain steadfast in your devotion. Holiness isn't perfection, it's direction, and that direction always points to Christ. So, if you find yourself surrounded by lions, the pressure to fit in, the fear of being different, the weight of guilt, remember Daniel's peace. He didn't fight the lions, he trusted the Lord. You don't have to fight everything alone. The same Christ who calms storms still commands peace in the pits of your life. You just have to believe that your story isn't over yet. What feels like your end might just be God's stage for a miracle that changes your destiny forever. Before you go, take this to heart. Daniel survived because he stayed connected to God. You can too. Keep reading the scriptures. They are your map through the darkness. Seek a church that truly preaches Christ, not performance but purpose. and one that serves others, helping the poor, the widows, and the orphans just like Jesus did. Don't walk alone, walk in faith. Because in every lion's den, there's a Savior waiting to prove that his love is stronger than fear. And if this story spoke to your soul, stay with us, because here on Divine War Stories, faith always wins. The